Did I get our mugs right?
Well, I like them both.
You like them both. I thought the purple one was yours, but I couldn't remember. But then I
feel
thought
like
the
that
elephant
weighs
was
more
yours.
me. This is my color inspiration for this whole room eventually one day. I thought, well, I just like them both.
Yeah.
We get a lot of mugs in Starbucks in airports. Almost exclusively. That's where we buy our travel mugs on our way home. We're like, we should get one from
Is it the most annoying thing about us?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Well,
it's up there.
that means we're pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, but it's pretty annoying.
It is pretty annoying.
Well, you always tell me I start the podcast in the exact same way, so at least it's starting differently this time.
Yeah, new mugs, new. Well, they're not totally new, but
I like this cup. You picked great.
thank you. Well, do you remember this one is because they were having like, if you spend so much, you get a free Starbucks bag. We're not even Starbucks people. I mean, we don't even drink Starbucks coffee generally.
No,
it's not in our repertoire, but for some reason,
I will say this though.
the merch just gets me.
I'm not a
time.
Starbucks person, but to not fully hate on Starbucks.
It's a pretty good bag though that we got for
Coming
free.
from the Seattle region.
Yeah, that's true.
I can tell you that Starbucks near Seattle is different than Starbucks everywhere else. I don't know why. I mean, their whole idea is that they can quality control and that you're supposed to be able to drink the exact same thing everywhere, but it is not the same.
You know
thing
they
everywhere.
can't quality control though.
What?
The attitudes. I think the Georgia.
It's fair.
I don't want to speak poorly of anyone.
You know what we need to send all Starbucks employees in Washington?
Teachable.
Washington. This episode.
An episode of How to Be Teachable.
Can I just say before we dive in, one of my favorite stories
Is that Starbucks
from
is the
your
only
life
job I didn't get?
is the moment that you applied to be a Starbucks barista and they just had no desire.
Only job I never got. I didn't get. I never got.
It's okay, so Emily and I are 21. We've just moved to Southern California. We're married. We're going to college,
baby.
and we need jobs to sustain our lives because we're broke. And just came off the mission field. We're young, obviously. And Emily applies at Starbucks, and it's one of my favorite things because now I realize at the time I just didn't know you well enough. Like I remember thinking, you're gonna do great. Of course they're hiring. You're amazing. You'll love this job. And then the interview process revealed not only how much you would have hated the job, but how right they were not to hire you.
I was not.
But it's still
good fit.
one of the weirdest, most brilliant / dumb interview processes I've ever heard of.
I think it is a brilliant interview process because you can really like sift out who you want there. I mean, whoever that manager was, it wasn't the West Covina Starbucks. I mean, we're getting specific.
San Dimas Starbucks. The downtown San Dimas Starbucks.
Really?
Yeah.
That would have been a fun place to work.
It would have been a fun place to work.
But it was a group interview the first time. One of those big tables that's in the middle of the Starbucks store. Everyone is sitting there. They give us a little like blank cardboard, like A-frame thing to make a name tag. There's glitter, there's stickers, there's markers. And they say what we want you to do is we want you to just write your name tag.
This is so
and
amazing.
your favorite Starbucks drink. And
like this.
Everyone started doing it. And they were putting glitters on it and sparkles on it. And I just was sitting there going, I've made a huge mistake.
I mean, you should have just walked out when they said group interview.
That's true. I didn't know myself well enough at the time. I was only 21. So I just write the name Emily on it in green. I'm like, this is as,
That's as much as I'm going to give
as much personality as you're going to get. And underneath it, I'm like, realizing I didn't drink Starbucks coffee. And I was like, I think I did. Actually, I think I probably put caramel macchiato because I knew it was a drink, which I now do get at Starbucks. Yeah. So that was probably really honest.
There you go. And
then I just sat there, like when you have to do group work in a class. I remember once in college, my professor was like, you can do group work or by yourself. And I'm like, of course, by myself. And I heard someone behind me be like, she always works by herself.
That's so great.
This is life, right? This is the same. This might have been the same week.
Yeah.
But I finished that questionnaire in class in like 8 minutes. And the teacher's like, if you're done, you can go. And I walked out and I remember turning around and looking at the guy who had said it. And he looked at his group and they'd only been like through 2 questions. I'm like, listen.
not
Group
bad.
work's not for
bad
me.
to be me alone.
Yeah. Emily alone's
But in the end,
pretty
right?
good.
So actually, these are great. On the same day,
didn't get a job offer.
Didn't get a job.
Didn't get a callback.
in that season, I got hired by Sears as a TV salesman. And we both came back away from our interviews with, thought we were going to surprise each other. Like, hey, I got a job. And you got a job as at Pier 1 Imports, which you eventually became the associate manager of.
I loved that job.
Yeah, I know you did. It's still probably the job you were the greatest at.
I was very good
You
at
were
it.
very good at that job. And again, so many things I didn't really know about you, like how much you loved design, how much, like you were just excellent at that job and from all of the details of it.
The decline of Pier 1, it was a personal.
And I just want to
sad for
say,
me.
there was a season where I was a pretty good TV salesman.
Yeah. That woo is your number one strengths finder.
Yeah, it was
We're very good
well, at
at
least
woo.
it was. I think it's dead
It
inside
woos.
of me most of the time now. But
What if the Lord was like, hey guys, go back to those jobs for 1 year?
I
Do you think you'd still be good at it or no?
oh, what a great question.
I mean, okay, let's say like take it in context. Obviously, selling TVs at Sears, maybe not the exact context, but like a salesperson in a store of technology.
Yeah, Sears no longer exists.
Right. And
so
people no longer.
and you're no
those
longer
box.
buying a 65-inch box Mitsubishi.
Well, on like 3 different credit cards
Yeah,
to try to cover it.
Okay, what I would say is what actually started to happen was, I mean, I really started to wrestle with
Crisis of conscience.
how to about the push that I was required to make around credit cards. And I was on commission. So I got a commission for the TV sold and I got a certain commission for the credit cards I sold. So they incentivized and I really started to struggle with it because I felt I wasn't in alignment with it, period. And I wasn't, we were in a lower income area.
And you could like see the harm.
And I really could. I was just like, and I remember talking with people who were there asking like what the minimum payments are. I remember saying, if you pay the minimum payments, you are going to be paying off this TV for the next 20 years. Don't do that.
Like that's not
you
your
have 1 year
basis.
interest only. Pay this TV off in 1 year. And I was counseling people, and that's where all these pastoral things started to really, we knew we were moving towards pastoring, but it was actually in that environment. I became very concerned with my employees. I became like, not my, they were my like coworkers. It was just like the shift to, I have to care about people. And it was really hard. It was really, really hard. So if I could find some kind of sales thing that wasn't like in this ethical dilemma for me, I probably would enjoy
If you
it.
believed in it, you would be very good at it. I would be a terrible salesperson.
Yeah, yes, you would. Real bad.
Just terrible.
Unless that sale was how to be alone.
Yeah. I think I would probably still crush it at a Pier 1. Rest in peace.
That's amazing. That is so, it is really funny to think about. And actually in this conversation about, Jesus and teachability, that is actually, I think, so important to look back on that season 20-ish years ago about who we were and who we've become. And I would love to ask for you, do you have a moment where in the early season of our marriage or that early stage of life, where it was like, oh, you were actually confronted with this vision of how you needed to become more teachable, or that you realized this was a place of transformation development that was it? Because I think I could say, it's not that I would call either of us unteachable, but we're certainly, I think, far more humble about what we need than I think from that initial season of life. Maybe that's you would not agree with that assessment.
I guess what I am thinking is there is actually very few seasons in our life where we haven't been in charge.
Yeah.
Like kind of from, obviously we had a lead pastor over us when we were youth pastors, but like he was so releasing. You basically ran a second church of the youth group, right? Like everything was, you were.
And he was my older brother who loves me, is the greatest person, and would have been there for me in anything I needed.
He was a good boss, but you were still in charge.
Yeah. We spent so much time together. It had nothing to do with youth ministry.
And like ministries got given to us at the church we were serving at, that we were in charge. And then, we planted a church and we were in charge, and not in like a authority way, but just like we actually don't have anyone telling us, trying to teach us. So we have to put ourselves in teachable positions. Yes. But in college, at those jobs, we were distinctly both not the head in charge person. And so I think there really was it was a good picture of our teachability. And I think I look back on it and I'm really pleased with it. I mean, I remember a staff meeting we had at Pier 1, and Jeff was like, hey, our sales this month were this. And he's like, I want you to go around. I want you to write down on a piece of paper if you thought it was a trend or a fluke. And everyone wrote trend because they were all excited. He was a new boss. They just brought him in, a new store manager. And I wrote fluke because I just didn't think we'd make those sales again. I was like, I don't know what. I was just like, and everyone wrote trend, and Jeff's like held it up and he's like, I wrote fluke. He's like, this was a fluke. But if we want it to be a trend, this has to change. And so
Jeff.
And I was like inspired. Like, not like, obviously sales were the goal, but I was inspired to like, okay, what can I do differently about my job that I have a goal now to make this a trend. Like I have a goal now for our team to coalesce together. I have a goal now for customers to be taken care of it's a small thing in leadership, but I remember being like, I loved being under and submitted to a leader who was a good leader. And I think maybe we've been really blessed to be under good leaders.
Yeah, we have.
That probably adds into our teachability. Like it's not all us. We're not like so humble that we're so teachable. I just think like when you have a leader that inspires you, it inspires teachability because you want to be like them. So I don't have like a crazy moment. I've just always remembered that thing, that it was like, I don't care how much money Pure One makes, but I really do care about this team and about this store. And like, it's fun to work together towards something.
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh man.
Oh, I can think of one.
Well, yeah.
I think you've already told it though.
I do. I think I have already
podcast.
Told it. Yeah. Pretty confrontational moment. Both my pastor, who I was kind of in a place of like a volunteer leadership position, just so thankful for him. But I would say for me, I think what I had to learn was, and this took me actually a long time, was that motivation or purity of intent wasn't a justifiable reason to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And it was really easy for me to know the intention of my heart and to know how hard I was trying. And when I struggled, I would say the single greatest leadership struggle I have ever had is just like effective boundaries, and therefore the consequence or the limitations or the end outcome, because I have ended up overcommitting or whatever the case may be. And I think it took me a long time to not feel accused when there was an element of something that I was doing that needed to get better. And I challenged, I struggled to hear the call to a different way that wasn't an accusation of the inner motivation of my heart.
Right.
And it clearly were my issues. And I'm just really grateful. I think when I didn't feel that, I was very teachable, but I was quick to connect those two things.
Which is just like, I feel like we went back to this last month's episode, was like, if it's attached to your identity, then it's really hard. If what someone is trying to teach you is attached to your identity, it's impossible, I think, to receive it until you've detached it from your identity.
Yes.
Because whether there's shame or like ego and whatever can be involved when we're like, if you're confronting this, you're attacking this thing I'm holding really precious. And so it's probably a pretty good litmus test if we have a hard time learning from someone. What is it that they are saying that we feel like is so offensive that we must have it attached to our identity somewhere?
Yeah, I agree. And I think what it shows me is that we are so constantly living to try to prove ourselves that we often cancel out the very thing we need the most, which is help transforming more and more into the image of Jesus. And you actually can't do both of those things at the same time. And to become, whether we're talking about becoming a better leader, whether we're talking about improving in a skill set, whether we're talking about there's just a character growth that's needed in our life. If I'm coming to the table of a conversation with a peer, with an authority, with whoever it may be, and the motivation that's inside of me is to prove myself, I actually cancel out any ability.
You'll never hear it, right?
And that's why actually I think one of the greatest places that teachability has to come from, you have to settle your worth and meaning in Christ. Because once that is not at the negotiating table, then it's not just that you're open, you're actually like,
hungry for it.
To get better.
Yeah.
Someone please tell me how to get better.
Yeah.
Somebody please push on these places in my life. I want to become more like Jesus. And the only way we become more like Jesus is through challenge, through conflict, through recognizing where we failed or where we need to grow. And so anyways, I'm excited. Listen, we get to have this conversation with a real friend in our life, AJ Swoboda, who also is somebody we deeply admire. It's kind of...
it's really like...
Yeah.
Hey, AJ.
AJ.
He's just so smart and thoughtful. And
AJ
wise.
is remarkable. He's written a brand new book on this very conversation, and I just think this is going to be amazing. So let's dive in, yeah?
Yeah.
So we are with AJ Swoboda, and AJ, we're so honored to have you here. We were talking about this offline right before you came on, but you are just genuinely not only a friend, you are a significant influence in our life and somebody we trust and admire and look up to and respect. And you are a significant author, and some of the books, and I told you this genuinely, your book After Doubt was a book that I hadn't found a book that had spoken to the situations of doubt the way you did. It was like a gift to me, and it was a gift to people I care about a lot. And many of your other books have been deeply impactful in my life. So I just want to say, one, it's an honor to have you on, and two, I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you. I feel it would be helpful if we recorded that little piece, and it could be like my ringtone for my alarm when I wake up in the morning. Because those are not the sorts of things that I generally tell myself. So it's nice to hear from somebody else nice things. I receive them, and it's a joy to be with you both today. Thanks for having me on the Resistance and Renewal podcast, taking over the podcast empire. That is R&R.
Taking it over. Hey, well, would you just for those that are new to you, would you just kind of give us a little bit of your story? And then you've written a brand new book, and we're excited we get to talk through some of the concepts in it. And I would just love to have you kind of share.
Yeah. Kind of rough sketch here, I guess, would be for the better part of 10 years in college. Was a college pastor, did college ministry, and then for 10 years planted and pastored a church in Portland, urban Portland. Until about 6 years ago, my wife and I made a major transition to return to the homeland, as it were, Eugene, which is where my wife is from. I live here. The prodigals have returned. I live in Eugene. I teach at Bushnell University, where I teach Bible and theology. And I kind of have an interesting faculty role. I have a split faculty responsibility here. And then I run a doctor of ministry program in formation and soul care at Friends University in Wichita, Kansas, with a fine team of people there, Keys Kiesler and Jim Bryant Smith, and fabulous team of people. And then I do some writing. And one thing about me that isn't popularly known is that my wife and I own 12 chickens, and I feel like this is a part of our story that doesn't get enough attention. Largely, my personal, the public facing side of my life just generally doesn't get into that dimension. But we have 12 12 chickens, each of whom is named after a Star Wars character. So Princess Leia egg, Chewbacca, Hen Solo.
Yes.
And yes.
Oh my
we
Lord.
have
Okay.
12.
What's the most
Hen
clever one? Like, what are
Solo.
you the which one
Princess
are you?
Leia egg? That was mine,
most?
and I won't lie to you, Emily. That one, that one's pretty
impressive.
That's a pretty special name to me.
Pretty special to you. Yeah.
That's impressive.
That is. Oh,
So
I
that's
do
a
feel
general
like.
overview of.
Yeah, that's a great. I think sometimes you get those little pieces of information about someone that open up. You're like, oh,
Game changers.
All right, so
okay, this is who AJ is. Okay.
Emily, if
Yep,
we were
that's
going to
right.
have chickens, what
would be
would be
guide.
the theme name? What would be the theme that guides our
Oh
chickens'
no, you're
names?
putting me on the spot.
I am
have
putting you
to
on the spot.
come up with one. Well, if I can't have Star Wars,
Yeah, she's a Star Wars girl, so it fits.
listen.
It's kind of
if I'm going to reach into like the depths of Emily Manginelli,
it's going to be Willow.
It's gonna be Willow. It's gonna be.
Have you ever seen Willow?
Willow a leg, an
AJ?
egg.
Have I ever seen what?
Willow.
Willow.
The movie
He
Willow.
said, "Have I
Oh!
ever seen what?"
Willow Offgo?
Yes, he
The-
Willow off good.
Yeah, of course.
The no
Of
one.
course.
To
Yeah.
Emily, it's the greatest movie ever made. And
Is that true, Emily?
Yeah. Mad
Of all time?
Mardigan.
Mad Madigan? Mad Madigan? Yeah, Mad Madigan. Yeah. And you remember? Oh, dude, so many. That's such a great movie.
I know. Listen,
That was Val Kilmer at his best.
I
Val
mean-
Kilmer at his best.
I'm saying this as a happily married woman, but yes, it was
Yeah.
Val Kilmer. That was my first
Not
crush.
only the women, but some. Yeah. Not only the women.
I'm
some
with
men
you.
alike.
Some
Yeah,
men
gorgeous
alike.
man.
Listen, if we had a second daughter, we were gonna name her Alora.
we were going to name her Laura. That's
Oh.
how you want AJ can ask you want to know how Emily gets to 43 and Willow is still her favorite movie? Because
I'm intrigued.
she
Me too.
needs your book and does not understand how to be teachable
Oh,
towards reality.
teachable. Oh, what he's saying
Nice
is I
tie-in.
don't. It is Phil's
a great tie-in.
the master at tie-ins. He's just saying that I don't like watching movies that make me feel more sad than normal life.
It's great. It's great.
Phil's like, you want to watch a war movie? I'm like, nope. I'll watch a fantasy movie about
Fantasy movie with Val Kilmer and tiny people.
trolls.
Really
and,
tiny fairy people.
yeah,
That has to have those three things. She'll watch it. All right.
brownies
Okay.
is what they're called in that movie.
So, AJ, I want to actually like our whole conversation, which matters a lot, is really around this vision of reclaiming teachability and how much being teachable matters as a part of spiritual formation, and actually that it genuinely feels like teachability is becoming a lost value in a lot of people's hearts and minds. And so I kind of would just love to start with going, for you, what is the centrality of this? Why does it matter? And what do you think is actually at stake in the conversation?
And can I add how the impetus for writing this book? Was it what you saw? Like, why this book now? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Great question. It's funny. I was being interviewed 2 days ago, and the guy who I was being interviewed by said, there's three things that Americans really don't know how to say. Like three things that Americans they just don't know how to say. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. And Worcester sauce. It's the third one. It's almost impossible to say. Americans really struggle with the third one. But the second one,
Yeah, it's fair.
go ahead and say it, by the way. Worcestershire
Worcester.
sauce. It's
Worcester.
almost impossible.
Worcester.
Nobody knows how to say it. Americans we don't know how to say we're wrong.
Yeah.
We don't know how to admit that we have equated knowledge with power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So knowledge. Jacques Derrida actually was a prophet in his own time. Knowledge is power. That is what structures much of our way of thinking about things. And increasingly, culturally speaking, we use knowledge now as a power play. I and you asked Emily, the impetus for this book was a story from a couple of years ago. I was watching this. I was watching the news, and I was watching this story of about a 25-year-old, year-old woman, young in her career, and she had gotten caught up in this kind of political. She'd made some really big. She'd broken the law, done some things for the politician she was working for, and she got in big trouble. She didn't hurt anybody, but she's this young person who she got caught. And I was watching this news recording of her public testimony in the court. And this young, 25, 30-year-old woman, we all at 25, 30 had made just some dumb mistakes. And she realized she got caught. And she was just so broken about her mistake. She's weeping on TV. And these are not crocodile tears. She is genuinely broken over what she did. And she's repenting. And she's saying, I'm sorry. I'm gonna learn from this. And I was sitting watching this woman, 25, 30-year-old woman, give this testimony. And I was very emotionally moved by what she was saying, because it has become so rare in the public landscape of our time. It's become so rare to see humility. I was watching this woman just be broken. In the Old Testament, right, when you are caught in sin or you're repenting, what do? You rip off your clothing and your sackcloth, you put on sackcloth, you rip your shirt, you put ash on your head. You walk around in these public displays of contriteness.
Yeah.
And I was watching this woman just be broken. And that evening I got on social media, which sort of hoping there would be this collective celebration of a woman who just was honest and willing to own her stuff. Mm-hmm. And I watched, it took me 10 minutes, but I watched for an hour as everybody on the opposite side of the political spectrum just trashed this girl, tarred and feathered her, shamed her. Had she listened to us, this wouldn't have happened. And I'm sitting there, to your question, Emily, I'm sitting there watching these two events happen at the same time. Her humility and her getting dunked on for humility. And it clicked for me. I saw, that is why none of us want to be humble learners who are teachable. Because we've set up a culture where being teachable is now a vulnerability.
Yeah.
And it's weaponized against you. Mm-hmm. That if you claim to be wrong, or you claim to have made a mistake, or you claim to have made an error, we have become a culture that demands repentance, but then we shame people who do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the heart of this book is that I think there's one group of people in this ideological, politicized craziness of our world that can retrieve humility. And I really believe it's the church.
Yeah.
And that we need to relearn the art of modeling to the world, that we know how to say we've been wrong, and that we are still so soft in our hearts that we want God to shape us and teach us and mold us.
Yeah.
That's the heart of this book, is to bring back what it means to be teachable in a world where everyone wants to be the teacher. How do we become teachable?
So we talk a lot in the church about spiritual formation, and would you consider teachability as part of spiritual formation? And if so, yep. I'm guessing the answer is yes. How do we balance both kind of this generation that is all for spiritual formation and yet is becoming increasingly unteachable?
Oh, that's a really great question. So how do we both embrace it does it matter to spiritual formation, and how does it apply to a generation that is unteachable? Okay, the first part of your question, which is a fabulous question, is it a part of spiritual formation? If you did a deep dive in the Bible and looked up the word teachable or teachability, it's not a word that's found in Scripture. Mm-hmm. You're not going to find that word anywhere, but it pervades everything.
Yeah.
The Proverbs are constantly talking about how the mocker rebukes correction, and the wise person seeks out correction, and they want people to speak truthfully. Words from a friend can be trusted. These sorts of lines about like, do we submit to someone who is greater than ourselves? Interestingly enough, the first time I ever encountered this idea of being a teachable person was back when I was about 22 years old, and Nate Petzel, who was my pastor at the time, assigned J. Oswald Sanders' book, Spiritual Leadership, which to this day is still one of my favorite books on Christian leadership. It's super dated, like it's got all the 1960s and 70s talk and 80s talk, but it's really awesome. And in that book, he has a chapter on how leaders need to be teachable people. I took that. I loved that. I mean, this idea was so meaningful for me of like, am I able to be molded and shaped and corrected? Can I learn from people? These sorts of things. So when I was researching for this book, I decided to do a deep dive on literature. And if you look at my footnotes, I mean, there's like 20 pages of footnotes. I was pretty extensive. I mean, I tried to find as much academic literature as I can on this topic. And here's what I found is that almost nobody writes on this stuff. Wow. A teachability is almost there's no books on the topic. And it's really kind of like rare to find it in the literature. But I found what I think is the first time the word is ever used. And it's really funny where it comes from. It comes from a sermon from John Calvin.
Wow.
In the 1500s, and he's preaching a sermon on Deuteronomy 10, which is that story where God tells Moses to bring the tablets up on the mountain, blank tablets, so that God could write on the tablets. And John Calvin, who loved Deuteronomy, it was one of his favorite books, when he preaches on Deuteronomy 10, he says, that is what the Christian life is all about, is that our task is to bring to God something that he could write on. The story of our life.
It's beautiful.
Right? How many of us go up the mountain, but we've already written on the tablets? There's no space for God to do any work while we're up there. Man. And you know what John Calvin called that? He called it a teachable spirit.
Wow.
And it's the first time in the literature that I can actually find that phrase, teachable. Do I think it's spiritual formation? If you are so self-secure and self-knowledgeable, if you are the center of your own universe, and by the way, there's 6 billion people on the planet, and everybody thinks there's the center of the universe, and it's not working out very well. Yeah. When you are so self-secure that you have no learning to do, you have no business following the way of Jesus, because the entire story of Jesus is leaving behind your life to follow him.
Yeah.
This is spiritual formation. It's not a part of it. It is spiritual formation. Now to the second question. My problem with the younger generation is not that they're not teachable. I actually think they're overly teachable. They are too formed by TikTok. They are too formed by what they see on Instagram. They are being taught. The problem is, I would argue that they're not listening to the good voices. It's one thing to be teachable. The pagan is teachable. Everybody's in some sense teachable because we're all listening to somebody. Anybody who listens to Joe Rogan is teachable. Everybody's teachable. Everybody who follows Andrew Tate is being teachable. The problem is not if you're teachable. The question is, who are you allowing to teach you?
Yeah.
And I think what I'm trying to say in this book is we have been wildly overly taught by the wrong voices. Yeah. And that there's a desperate need there's a difference between being teachable and being impressionable.
Yes,
impressionable is you just everywhere you are, you're just picking up everything everybody says to you.
Yeah.
Exactly. You just, every room you go in, it makes you a new person and you're transforming every room you're in. That's impressionability. That's not teachability. Teachability
AJ.
is like, So,
no, I mean, I think, it just connects back to this kind of phrase you used earlier that I've been thinking about, right? Which is that the desire in us is, I feel like I'm not going to say it exactly as you did, but to never be taught, but always be the teacher. And that drive, because what it connects almost what you're just saying is that we intake information not to learn, but to kind of gain a platform.
Impose,
So the information that's coming in isn't actually so that I would just grow. The information that's coming in was that so I could platform myself better. So it actually completely inverts the entire. You're not actually learning anything, And
Yep.
so I want to like, why do we have a drive to always be the teacher? What is like, what's at the heart of that? Is that just, I mean, is that true of all humans anywhere? Or is there something in this moment where it's like the hyper drive of like, I always have to be the teacher?
Yep. Okay. So is it okay that, Phil, you raise a really good question. Like, is it okay to want to be a teacher?
Yeah.
Is it okay to want to be somebody who has wisdom and you teach and you're known for that stuff? And I think if you ask Paul, absolutely it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He who desires to be an overseer desires a noble task.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. But here's what's interesting. Look at what Paul says, and I think it's in two places. It's not. Forgive me. It's not in Titus, because he has two elder lists, 1 Timothy and Titus. In 1 Timothy, Paul makes this. You have to look really carefully, but he has this little tiny admonition, this commandment, that no new convert should be an elder.
Yeah.
And it's a weird commandment, because you would think, like, if it's all about the power, if it's all about spreading as fast as you can, you would think they'd be like, get these young people in here and get them going as fast as you can. But he says, I don't want, it's very specific, I don't want new converts to be overseers, pastors, and leaders, to keep them from being conceited.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting because he doesn't mention that to Titus, who is on Crete. Mm-hmm. And people like Scott McKnight and others have argued that the reason he doesn't is because the church in Titus was a community of brand new Christians, and there was nobody else, so he had to lean on the new Christians in that group. Mm-hmm. But
it's the elder list for church plants, is what you're saying. Which is
that's
a little
exactly
bit different.
Right. That's exactly right. Why wait?
Yeah.
Why wait? What is being tested?
Yeah.
And I think the answer to the question is actually Genesis 2. I'm convinced that the reason why Paul wants these new Christians to wait before they become people in power is in Genesis 2, you will note that when God creates the man, the woman is not created until afterwards. He has to wait for her.
Yeah.
And when you look in the creation story, who is the most powerful creature in the Garden of Eden?
Yeah.
The man is. He was created with the image of God, the power to rule and the power to destroy and the power to subdue the garden. He had the power to steward it and the power to destroy it. The most powerful creature in the garden was Adam. And when I find it really interesting that he has to wait for the woman, and that there is only one creature in the garden that has to wait for something, and it's the humans, because the most powerful beings must be forged by restraint and waiting. Because if you have power without restraint, you destroy the Garden of Eden. And if you have a new Christian who is all of a sudden given the platform, but they have not been forged by being taught by the elders, by people who have laid down their life to teach them, all you're doing is giving somebody power without the testing of restraint.
Yeah.
So the point is like it is beautiful to want to be a teacher. But if you are a teacher without having had to have been taught for a season of time and shepherded and molded and challenged and put under the put under the testing light, as it were, that's a setup for spiritual abuse and deep harm in the church.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it makes me kind of immediately like because it's interesting. I was in that same passage recently, right? Don't become conceited lest they fall into the devil's trap.
That's right. Yeah.
And you just think about that.
What is the devil's trap?
Right.
In Genesis 3,
right,
he tricks the humans to eat from the tree God said not to eat from. The devil's trap. It's Genesis 3 is the devil's trap is don't listen to God's command to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were convinced.
They were convinced the restraining was was punitive, not loving. The restraining was
That's right.
unfair.
In fact, Eastern Orthodox theologians, and I actually think I agree with them, Eastern Orthodox theologians actually argue that had Adam, the man and the woman, been able to wait, they would have been able to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But they had to wait.
Yeah.
But they were unwilling to wait.
Wow.
So again, we could debate that, but at the end of the day, I think Power and restraint must go hand in hand. This is why ChatGPT and AI are so destructive.
Yeah.
Because they give a generation of kids all the power with no need to wait.
Man.
Yeah.
So it's like all that.
Oh gosh, we're just talking all over each other because there's so much happening. It's really interesting, AJ, because it's funny that recently I was in Geneva with my second son, Rowan. We kind of just turned 13, coming of age trip. We do this kind of thing with our kids where when they turn 13, we get to take one kind of like life memorable moment.
We saw John Calvin's cup.
And
speaking of,
it was pretty amazing,
cup.
actually. Being in Geneva, being in John Calvin's church, we were having a lot of conversations around this. But in that same, so I was on a train ride with my son to Geneva as a kind of a father-son, beginning this moment where we're going to be stepping into a season of, through his teenage years, apprenticeship, discipleship, kind of formation, just very intentional life together. And we were on this train, and one of this kind of like intentional conversations we have, we just begin to talk about Proverbs 4, which is all about wisdom. And I was just having this conversation with Rowan about kind of the heart of what it really means to be a man, and in the heart I have for him. And I just said, Rowan, I have so much that's in my heart for you, but I think the greatest thing I have to offer you, if you'll receive it, is just the vulnerability of all of my failures. And I just said, at your age, the single greatest mistake I made was that I chose the autonomy of secrets for the transformation of vulnerability. And I felt that ache so much in my life. And I look back and I see even the things I lost in certain seasons that God redeemed and is a redeemer. But it was a really important moment. And I was having this really sweet moment with my son, and just genuinely talking about like that the heart of wisdom, and in Proverbs 4, even the invitation is it's actually like that. It's not about wisdom is not found by those who know the most. Wisdom is found by those who are willing to humble themselves the most and actually grow from the pursuit of wisdom, which means you have to put wisdom in action. And it was interesting. He asked me this question, which my oldest son had never really kind of phrased. He just goes, Dad, if you could go back to my age, like what would you do different? And I just said, man, Rowan, I would just be okay that I was not okay, and okay that I was wrong, and okay that I was hurting, and okay that all of these things became such an attack on my sense of worth and identity. And I just wanted to numb the pain, and I wanted to run deeper away from it. But man, I just wish I could have figured out a way to come to people that I trusted and go, I need help. I'm hurt. I'm struggling. And I said, if I could go back and change one thing, I think I would be a vulnerable that I needed help. And it was really amazing to hear him process through that. So I just, in the middle of all these conversations, I have that moment fresh in my mind about, man, how much this matters. And part of it is, and I think this is the challenge you're talking about, a generation, but it's even the challenge we experience in our lives. It's not a lifestyle that is put in front of us very often. And or
because it gets so
because even going back to what you
attacked.
talked about, that actually, how do we take a life of true humility and learn from it, and even the intimate vulnerability of it? It just feels like, where do you learn to be teachable from, if not from somebody in front of you who's teachable,
repenting
and walking you through that? And I just realized, like, what a missing piece that is so desperately needed in people's lives, and it just grieves me. I'm not even trying to make a point. I'm just processing out loud. It just because I think we desperately need heroes who open up all of their failures, and I think it's just really hard to find. It's just really hard to find.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being so vulnerable about this, and also for modeling for us what a model for man. Yeah, I'm trying to say your kiddo's a lucky dude. What a gift to have him have a vulnerable dad like that. When I think I'm similar to you. I took my son up a mountain when he was 13, just this last summer for his primal path experience, as it were. And the hardest part for me in the journey was the deep sadness, and I would even say shame, that I was doing for my son something that nobody ever did for me. So giving a gift away that I was never given, right? And I remember actually we were before the journey up the mountain. My son, we were in my truck, and he was asking me about what this experience was going to be like. He was totally freaked out. He thought like when you got to the top of the mountain, like we'd sacrifice him or something.
Like a little bit of an Isaac moment.
I told him, I said, bro, we're going to circumcise you when we get up there. And he was like, I don't want to go. So
I got you a new knife.
Son, you carry the wood. I got the knife, right? We'll go up the mountain. So he was like terrified. And I was like, bro, you're not going to, don't worry about that. But so we're in our car, and we're driving along, and he asks me the one question I just prayed he would not ask me. And he said, so Dad, did your dad do this for you? And I didn't want him to ask that, because I wanted him to think that I was passing on this thing that had been handed down from generations, when in reality, I'm the first one doing that.
Yeah.
And I said, no, my dad didn't do this for me. And I could feel the shame in my body. But I looked over at him, and he sat up and he said, you're doing this for me? And he felt so honored and loved. Don't we all have moments in our life where we are being asked to teach others in ways that we ourselves have not been taught?
Yeah.
And those places are vulnerable. I mean, as pastors and leaders, right? I feel like we're constantly leading people without really knowing exactly what we're doing all the time. Having men and women in our life who are older, who have wisdom to give us, is critical to developing the skill of teachability. It is critical that we have people in our life who have permission to actually speak truthfully to us. I'd invite every listener who's married and has kids, regularly make it a discipline to ask your spouse and your child, what is it like to live with me? And you'll very quickly have to develop a teachable spirit, because it's terrifying to know what you're like to live with. Yeah. So all that to say, you're right. Developing the skill of teachability, heavy stuff.
Man.
One thing I'm noticing is when I wonder if when people think about having a teachable spirit, they equate it with being a learner, and like, it's pretty easy to be a learner. I can read books that build me up. I can go to classes that build up for what I want. And like this idea that like leaders are readers, which is true, but like it seems as we're talking through this distinct difference between being a learner and being teachable is being a learner is adding things to your repertoire, things to your, tool belt. Whereas being teachable is like going back to the picture of having the empty heart for God to write on. It's actually, it's trading out. Maybe it's changing. It's this vulnerability. You aren't just putting things on. That's being a learner, but you're letting someone take something out, examine it, changing it.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what's being teachable.
Like there's a difference between being self-taught and taught by somebody else. Like being self-taught is I'm going to go binge a bunch of podcasts to get the stuff I'm looking for versus taking a class where the professor tells you you have to read these books and you're going to have to follow what I'm telling you to do. I think the majority of the Christian life should be that we are following in someone else's footsteps.
Yeah.
Paul's comments, follow me as I follow Christ. Hebrews 12, to run the race that has been marked out for you.
Yeah.
It's not you creating your own pathway of learning. It's actually following somebody else's pathway.
Yeah.
It's following in the footsteps of somebody who's gone ahead of you. We worship being self-taught. Like we love being able to, you know what I love? A confession of shame here and sin. I didn't know this was going to be a confessional, you guys. You know what I love to do is I love to listen to a podcast and then talk about the stuff I learned from that afterwards with people I don't know and make it sound like I know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. You know what that's called? It's called pride.
I was like,
because you know what I'm doing?
Sociable. I can't even do that.
yes, right,
I can't even regurgitate information in conversations.
I'm using now. I'm using information and then spinning it and making it sound like, oh, he really knows what he's talking about. I'm basically using knowledge as a means of gaining power and authority and influence, and that is the lust of the flesh. That is flesh.
Yeah.
That is flesh. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up.
It makes me think, and I have just this last thought. I want to hear your thought on it before we end. Like something you said at the very beginning, AJ, of that we live in this moment. Knowledge is power, and knowledge is a form of power. But we've just so reframed that around an exclusive and I think faulty concept, and it's this. I think this picture of the foolishness of what we believe, which is if I can acquire more assets, if I can acquire more knowledge, then I'm going to ultimately end in this position. And I think as the church, what we have to realize is that what you're talking about, Emily, that there is a profound difference between learning and being teachable. And I think if we don't, at great peril to the future of the church, if we don't figure this out, because I think what you're saying is that true knowledge is actually the transformation process of dying to self and humility and the transformation into the image of Jesus. And it just makes me think about like Paul when he's saying, he's talking about that our message is Christ crucified. And it's different. And listen, there's a different wisdom that the Gentiles are looking for, and there's a different wisdom that the Jews are looking for, and they're both looking for. And I just think that is almost what we're saying. And AJ, what you're talking about, like we're in a moment where there's a different thing our world's looking for, but our message is a unique message, and that message is actually Christ crucified, and that real power, real knowledge, real life, real everything. Because the message of Christ crucified is like, hey, you come and die. You don't have what it takes. You don't know everything. You're not God's gift to the world. Actually, it's an invitation into to the transformation that only the cross can bring. And I think Emily, what I wanted to just hear you say or kind of speak to is I feel like your journey as genuinely one of the smartest people I know, genuinely somebody who lives in this place of intellect and you're pretty crazy when it comes to what you know and your ability to learn things. But I've also watched you over the years go on.
You're so crazy.
It's like the more you know, the humbler you get. And I just, what is that? How does that, what has happened in your life that you've learned a lot more. You've become you're a pretty profound teacher, but actually your awareness of yourself has become different. What is that? Because I think you do that in a way that I don't see many people do, including myself.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'll make it fast. I know we have to wrap up. I think just even as a learner, the more you learn, the more aware you are of what you don't know, right? Like the more you broaden you're learning, the more you're like, I have no idea about most things. And I think that there's a real surprising arrogance that people can be like AJ was saying, we're all the center of our own universe. I mean, it's just even like just the way our bodies are made. All I can see is my perspective. Like that's how my body and eyes work. All I can see is my perspective. But to think that I have enough, I've learned enough, I know enough, when you look at the vast history, geography, and like sheer number of humans on Earth, you're like, that's wildly arrogant. But I also think that the more you know, it's not knowledge, it's a heart knowledge. The more you know about Jesus, the more aware you are of your sin. And I just even think about Paul. And I just heard someone teach this. So in full honesty, I'm saying this isn't even my own thought. Like, way to convict me, AJ. But he goes, at the beginning of Paul's writings, he says, I'm the least of the apostles. And then as he knows Jesus more and more, he gets to, I am the least of the saints. And near the end of his life, he says, I am the foremost of sinners. As he became transformed into Jesus, he is way more aware of his sin, and his sin is more striking to him as he compares it to the character of God. And I think that's what I want my life to pour out, like this idea that I am not strong in my own strength. That's what I'm always fighting against. To me, knowledge is power. It's also security. If I know enough, then I'll be safe in a conversation, in this, in that, when someone asks me a question. And the Lord has to continually bring me back to, Corinthians. I am just a jar of clay. And when I think I am strong, I'm actually the weakest I am. And I have to constantly be throwing that down at Jesus' feet. So thank you for
Imagine
saying that,
if the church believed part of maturity in Christ became a greater and a greater and a greater and a greater awareness of your need for the cross. I don't hear that preached very much. I think there's some things we need to learn. AJ, can I just close on this question for you?
Well, can I just offer an image before we go?
For sure.
It's exactly what Emily just said. One of the things that most strikes me about the early church fathers, the early mothers and fathers of the church, is that they wrote a lot. People like Augustine, Athanasius, church historian Eusebius, you've got Tertullian, all these different individuals. When you read the early church fathers and mothers, you'll notice that often, after having written a ton of books, their last book, almost always, is a book that names all the things that they are willing to publicly say they've been wrong about. Wow. Augustine's last book was a book called Retractations. And it's basically him going on record and saying, I have been wrong about a bunch of things.
Man.
Think about that for a
what
minute.
a goal to have, like at the end of my life.
What an image. A goal, like, I'm going to spend my life serving and loving and knowing about Jesus. And I want to drop the mic by telling you all the stuff I've been wrong about.
Wow.
Like, is that not Christ-likeness?
It's crazy, actually. All right. Make it, I don't know, book 30 for you. That's what my goal.
Oh.
Well, it depends on how often you write them. Don't die soon. Don't die, AJ.
I
Don't
don't know.
die.
Yeah. Don't die.
Yeah.
Don't die. Don't die.
Don't
Don't
die.
die. I'm doing my best. My doctor told me that my cholesterol's a tad high, so I am doing what I need to do to mitigate these issues.
Being teachable.
But
All right,
being teachable.
last word, AJ. Somebody listening to this, and they're like, okay, I've got to grow in this. What is like the one line invitation? Where do you start? Somebody's like, I've got to become more teachable.
Wake up every single morning and read one chapter of the Gospels and let Jesus kick you around a little bit.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Every day.
All right.
Okay.
And I don't say kick you around in like an abusive way. I'm just saying, like, let him disturb you.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Amen.
Oh, AJ, thank you.
You guys are
Thank
awesome.
you, AJ. So happy to talk to you.
I feel like I just need to
Go read the Gospels.
go read the Gospels and spend some time with Jesus.
Yeah.
Go read the Bible.
All right.
Okay. Love you,
Bye,
bro.
guys.
Bye, friend.
Love you too. Grace and peace.
Mm-hmm.